Welcome to the next video of my short tips or my quick tips. Today I will take a look onto the Subgrid CSS. I will quickly go over the main topic and we'll quickly take a look into the code. But overall, what Subgrid does is it allowing you as a developer to use the same grid of a parent in sub-elements. Here I have an example with a table, and in this table we have from HTML perspective we have 3 elements directly below this grid. You already can see that this grid is like a 3 by 3, and you also can see that it defines its columns here by auto 1fr 2fr. That means the first column should be as wide as it need to show the content. The second one is 1/3 of the remaining space from after the ID to the end of the table, and the details should be 2/3 of the remaining space between that. But as you can see that below that grid we only have 3 elements, but normally in a grid you would have 9 elements to get that placed in the right spots. What you can now do with the subgrid, that you have to set by grid template columns and then the subgrid, and also it's possible to set grid template rows subgrid. That will be in the next example. And what you kind of telling the browser to do is it should apply the same proportions and the same columns as the host or the parent. That means it's very important that you placing the subgrid stuff directly below the main grid. And you of course can go and nest the stuff, but in first place it's important that you have a grid above and directly the element below, the children, has the subgrid. And what you now doing with this is you kind of getting space from the main grid. In that example, it using every column it can get. And with this grid template columns, you're then telling this it's also a grid here, and you're telling it that it should use the same columns from the parent and using it for the elements below. As you can see, here I have the 3 elements that using this space. And it's the same for the 2 table rows. They also have a subgrid. They are self a grid, and they kind of spanning or combining existing columns. That's kind of all what is about the subgrid in that example. I also made this in the repository for the Angular examples because I think that it's better to understand it based on a framework, because nowadays that's the most used approach for web applications. And for the table example, we have here super simple a header name, and here a component that we have created here. And this one has in the styling this display grid, the grid template columns, subgrid, and the spanning. So that's kind of all about the table. Subgrid kind of allows you to use the parent grid depending on what columns you kind of spanning about. A good example is here that you already can see. If you would make it kind of with a flex or something, that you would have problems when you change here the ID to ID number, because now you see it reacting based on this, and this John Doe is perfectly aligned with the name again. without like has to calculate some widths and so on because of the subgrid system. The second example is a card grid with subgrid layout. It's kind of the same, but with the difference that it kind of using the rows to make this. That means in the card example, we can quickly directly look into here. You see that we have 3 components of the app card item that is placed here with like an image and so on. And we can quickly take a look here. Here we have the main grid. You can see it's again a 3 by 3 grid, but this time every card spanning with the rows. And then you can use the grid template rows subgrid to tell this grid to applying like the cells that are in the rows, and that allows you to place the content perfectly in a line with all the images. You can see all titles are in the kind of same spacing, and all descriptions are that. And if you would remove here the title, or we can remove it completely, you see like that the descriptions go up and the cards getting smaller, because all of this is again based on the subgrid system, because every card getting 3 rows and spanning along them, and then telling it should maintain the 3 rows it had. Then okay, we have like here it's like deeply nested because we have a grid, and this one again spanning 3 rows, and then again a subgrid, and then we have 3 contents that get placed perfectly, and we are good to go. And the benefit of it, as you can see, if you would make it as flags, you will get problems to like placing the descriptions at the perfect height, the titles perfectly independent how long they are, and also the images. And here the cool thing is that you can adjust everything. That means I can say, okay, let me make the images 100 pixels. If I write it correctly. Okay, it's a bad example because the image, 100%, for example. So, and if we now changing the grid, we can kind of like make all images bigger, or saying, okay, the title should always be 100 pixels or 200 pixels, and so on. You kind of have better control over the spaces of all components, and overall it not looks like that there are any problems based on like spaces, because everything you see uses the grid, and that's the cool thing about the subgrid. You are a front-end developer working with Angular? I've created a course for everyone wanting the latest info on Angular 17 and 18. It covers built-in control flow, standalone components, signals, migrating to Angular 17, and building an app from scratch. The course is in the description. Lastly, I will go over the dashboard layout with dynamic spans. Here I made a more complex example with different kind of containers. I already quickly will fix this because that's totally wrong. Okay. Here we have a more complex grid, as you can see. And what this does is that we have different containers, again 3 of them, and we have this kind of complex example. And what we are kind of do is like we have this grid and placing these 3 containers. This one, for example, spanning along 2 columns and two rows and using the subgrid for rows and columns. And the good thing about this is that if you take a look, you see in that example it kind of have this subgrid and placing the header there, and it have an weather content container that is again a grid with a subgrid that's spanning along two columns. That's the reason why it's not placed in the top right corner, because it says it needs two columns. And then this one is again a subgrid which places its elements in like an own grid system, but with the same columns. You kind of can see based on the purple areas that this stuff like comes from the top, like it's exactly the same spacing that you already can see. Also, we have here one element that spans in two columns, two rows, and have again a subgrid and placing its content kind of here. And this one is the first one that kind of not using the main grid, but you can see that the content again is based on the main grid. Lastly, we have here an example again. It's similarly like this one. It's be like a span 2, column span 2, and yeah, it kind of have its own subgrid system that allows it to be as big as possible. And yeah, you kind of can see that everything get like its own spaces, but it tries to get the same heights for the same row. And you of course can like say, okay, I want to have rows, every one with 200 pixels or only 15 pixels. And you see like, of course, the content not responding like that correctly, but you have full control over how everything works together. Or you can say, okay, let me make 5 columns, for example, or make 2 columns. And you have full control about everything. You can make 4 again and can, for example, adjust the gap. And you see like that every content here reacting to changes of the main grid. And that's kind of the main benefit of all of that, because you have full control over the main grid, and because you're using subgrid, it also gets applied to all its children.